My guest today is Dawn Barrington. Dawn, a big welcome to you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Lovely to speak to you and to see you for the first time.
Indeed. Dawn is a Western Australian and she is a gifted songwriter and singer, and she moves around different festivals and different venues, and she has a story to tell. It's not her story, it's the story of people who are living offshore in detention centres, compliments of the Australian government. And what we're wanting to do today is to unpack that story that Dawn tells through her songs. Music is such a powerful medium to get a message across.
When you're in that room filled with despair, there are people in this world that really do care.
I only got engaged in this really fully probably 2016, because up until then I didn't realise how bad it was. So I was just like every other person that I see on the street when I stand out do my weekly protest, and I had no idea. So I just assumed that these people who arrived on a boat, they were sent to be processed, and then they got processed, and then they were, I'm not sure what happened, but I assumed the right thing happened, and I assumed that the government would, this is Australia, would, a humane, democratic nation, first world. I just assumed that all the right things would be happening and all the protocols would be in place, and I had no idea.
Yes, and that's part of the purpose of this podcast, as I see it, is going behind the policies, whether we agree with them or we don't agree with them, and finding out about the people.
Look, and that's another thing that I think is really important about this conversation as well, is that a lot of people's experience of people coming to Australia, it's about migration. They talk about migration, they talk about coming here legally and all that kind of stuff. Whereas asylum seekers are actually just this very small percent of people that are nothing to do with migration. They're seeking asylum. People that arrive by boats who seek asylum, 95, this is by the Caldor Institute I'm pretty sure the Caldor Institute will have this as research. 95% of them are positive, so are assessed and seen as refugees. People who arrive by plane, only 60% are. So it's very rare for someone to arrive by a boat and not be a refugee. Yeah.
Yes. I know that most of those who arrive by plane are New Zealanders who end up in our our detention centres.
So this obviously is back to front for everybody. However, it's called Escape from Manus. I'm just reading it now. Yeah. And it's just been released. And it's Javier Elu. He's the only man that ever escaped from Manus Island. It's an incredible read. It's all true, of course. He's an incredibly resilient man, and it gives you a really good understanding of what actually a refugee really is. Because when you see what this person's gone through, and look, I've heard the stories of the guys, the ones that were in the army in Iraq, and they were chased by ISIS, they were shot at, and they were captured, they were tortured. The people from Somalia caught by the Al-Shabaab and then tortured. If you don't come and fight with us, we're going to kill you. So it's you don't do that. And of course you're not going to go to the embassy and go and get a visa and a travel permit to come to Australia, are you? You can't do that, because if you're in a country like Iraq, you can't even get a visa to go to countries like Australia or America. So,
and since that time that the policies changed, we now have all of our those people who arrived, perhaps they were living on Christmas Island at the time and waiting to be processed to perhaps come into the mainland. They have now been moved to offshore places.
Yeah, 2013, when the policy changed, when Kevin Rudd said, if you arrive by boat, July the 19th is a very important date. He said, if you arrive by boat, you will never ever settle in Australia. And I think it could have been, was it Kevin Rudd? I remember him saying it, and Julia Gillard is also part of that. She might have been the person that put it in place, and Kevin Rudd followed through with it. And then, of course, the next prime minister was Scott Morrison, wasn't it? No, it wasn't. No, who was next? Forgotten. But it wasn't.
We
Scott
had a
Morrison,
Malcolm Turnbull thrown in there.
Turnbull, Malcolm Turnbull. That's it. Damn.
You're doing very well.
And so what happened was in 2013, this very important date, July the 19th, was the date that if you arrived by boat on that day, you would be sent to Manus or Nauru. If you arrived days before, you were let into Australia. And actually, approximately 4,500 people, approximately 4,500 asylum seekers arrived on Christmas Island in 2013 on that date and after. And they sent about 1,500 to Manus, about 1,500 to Nauru. And they sent all the boys and men to Manus and the families to Nauru and some of the single men. And they sent 1,000 straight into Australia because there was no room on Manus or Nauru. So 1,000 just was snuck straight in quietly. No one knew about that one. And so those ones that were sent there, every person that was sent to Manus and Nauru in 2013 were left there and told, you're never ever going to come to Australia. You're going to be here a very long time. Some of those people are still there now, 8 years later. Approximately 900 were brought to Australia because they had serious medical problems. Over the last 7 years or so, 100 came 2 years ago and have been locked up in a hotel and in detention centres for 2 whole years.
What will happen?
Yeah, that's a question I get asked all the time. What do you think is going to come out of this? I don't know. I don't know what the plan is. And I think many of us have given up trying to work it out. What are they doing? They've released 100 guys this year. So Medevac legislation came in 2 years ago. The guys were so sick. When I went to Manus the first time, I met so many sick young men. They were just totally damaged mentally. And I thought they're not going to last much longer. And they had been there 5 years at that point. And then when I went the second time, I just couldn't believe that they were still surviving. I saw hundreds of really sick men, mainly young men. There were a few that are a bit elderly, but not many. It was mainly young men. And they're just going, what's going to happen? Why are they keeping us here? We've done nothing wrong. We've not been charged with anything. And so in 2019, a legislation was passed in Parliament. It was the first time in just under 100 years that actually it was a Labour member, a Greens member, some independents. Kieran Phelps brought it in. A doctor called Sarah Townsend, she got 7,000 signatures from doctors across Australia. We got to get these sick guys here. We need to give them treatment. And that passed, and that had never happened in up to 100 years. And so Peter Dutton, Minister for Immigration at the time, and Scott Morrison were furious because they'd lost something. So these 200 people that were brought to Australia with this Medevac legislation 2 years ago have been punished for that. And approximately 90 or so were released in January, February this year. And then the other 100 or so have been left in there, just languishing.
Sorry, left in where?
In detention centres. And
here on the mainland.
Yeah, and there's a hotel in Melbourne where they've kept 30 plus men for 2 years. Just restricted to the hotel. They can't leave the hotel. They're guarded 24/7. And who knows? I don't know what's going to happen. That's what we're all fighting for. That's what this is about.
So let's talk about the first time you went to Manus. Why did you go, and what did you see, and how did it change what you did going forward?
I actually got contacted by Moz from Manus. Moz is a musician on Manus, and he contacted me. It was about August 2017, and what happened was the High Court of PNG had ruled that what Australia was doing was illegal, and they had to open up the cages because the guys were kept in cages and tents and in very harsh conditions. Like, it was all locked, and just one of their friends was murdered actually by an Australian and New Zealand guard. It was horrendous. And so they were, the High Court of PNG said it was illegal what we were doing. And so they opened the gates. And then the Australian government decided to build new camps in the town on Manus, Lorango, which was very not ideal because it was not safe. So on Manus Island, when the refugees were sent there, the locals were told that they were terrorists and criminals, and the refugees were told that the Manusians were cannibals. So right from the beginning, there was this hostility. And so, and a lot of the guys, when they did open the gates and they went into town, they were attacked by locals. And so I just basically got this message from Moz. He was being sent to they were going to be forced to go to the new camps that were built near the town, which would be sort of open. And so they were terrified because they were like, they're going to kill us. We're not going to survive, you know. So they said, no, you can't move us. And so they had like this blockade where they said, we're not moving. It was a peaceful protest. They knew that if they did get moved, they would never get free. They'd be stuck there forever. And so about 300 of them, or 280, said, we're not going. And then what happened is the Australian, it was PNG guards, but also Australian guards. They came in and they just totally trashed the place. They knocked down all the water tanks. They smashed everything and took the food, took everything. So the guys were left without food and water for 28 days. And some of them, they dug wells, they did all sorts of things to survive that 28 days. And Moz contacted me before that happened, and he was terrified. He was stammering. He was like, just so I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just so, So that was when I first got the contact and thought, I've got to do something like, what can I do? I just play music though. I'm not a caseworker. I'm not a refugee advocate. I've never done anything. So I thought the first thing I did was I stood in the street with Ruth with our signs, and we started protesting peacefully in town to raise awareness. That was December 4 years ago, and I still do it now every week in Fremantle. And I then decided, after we got some backlash, some people were like a bit hostile towards what we were doing, I needed to get some evidence to show people, because I absolutely truly believe that if they knew the truth about what was going on, what I just witnessed on this little 30, 40, 50-second video of things being smashed over by guards and that, and this guy in absolute terror, I thought they would be horrified. So I decided to go there, take a filmmaker and try and produce a documentary or just something to bring back and show people. And so that's what happened. And I took it back to Denmark and showed the community, and they were all like shocked, couldn't believe it, horrified.
Right.
And then I took it all down the Central Coast, and I just kept going and going, because I met these young men. I sat with them, heard their stories, saw the condition they were all in, and I was like, I can't do nothing, You can't just leave, people, they were dying. They were literally dying. Like,
right.
They had like, one of the guys there, he had an infection on his wrist. It got worse. He went to Darwin, and they said to him, we can fix this, not a problem. He was in Darwin for 5 months. And then in the night, before they did the operation, he was taken straight back to Manus Island. This is what Home Affairs does all the time. They'll just put them on a plane and take them just to remove them, because they don't want him to have any chance of staying here. And then he was on Manus for a whole year in pain. And then he was sent to Port Moresby for an operation, which went wrong. He woke up in more pain, and he's paralyzed. He's on the YouTube. I've got the video on YouTube, Dawn Barrington, Manus Island. And he was, when I met him, he'd been at this hotel where all the sick men were put while they're having their medical appointments, where they're just drugged up 24/7. They're basically painkillers, sleeping tablets, antidepressants. And this bogus hospital, which is funded by the Australian government, is there to do the test, but it doesn't give you any treatments. And they're literally dying. This guy, he lost the use of his hand. It all shriveled, his muscle wasted away. He's in pain all the time. I had to do something. I couldn't just. And I saw another guy. His wrist. He was pushed by a guard. His wrist was broken. It was totally deformed. They never actually fixed it, and he's still got that. You know, these guys have been brought to Australia now. They're living in the community in Australia now on temporary visas, but they've still been told you'll never stay here. And they're in the community because they were medevaced here. It was a medical emergency. So when you see all this, and when your country, the country that you call home and that you're a citizen of, is actually committing this crime, because it's criminal what's happening, I can't not do something.
Got your back against that wall. There are people in this world nobody at all. We live and we die. Sometimes we cry beneath the hurt and pain.
I toured Australia 3 times doing music talks events. So I do music talks. I just ask people, do you want a book? I roll up. I show them little bits of the documentary. I talk. I play songs I've written dedicated to the refugees, songs that I've written that have just come up because it's a bit of a situation, and a song I've written with a refugee. And sometimes, and I just, you know, it's just raising awareness and trying to find ways. I send an email out every month. I've done it since my first visit, telling all the people that I've met all over Australia, this is what's happening now. Every month they get the inside story, because these guys are still locked up. They're still languishing offshore. I have contact with lots of the guys on a regular basis. I visit some in detention. Yeah, I just do whatever I can. Yeah, whatever I can, basically.
Not only is this a humanitarian issue for the refugees, I think of the communities in which basically they've been dumped, and then some deal has been stitched up with the government basically to pay them off to have them there. And how can this be good for those local communities?
Yeah, and that's another thing. My friend used to hold a sign saying "Free Manus, Free Nauru," because they've also been imprisoned or captured by or entangled in this web of corruption. And because for each refugee detained on Manus Island and Nauru, each refugee, it was costing $650,000 per year for each person, which is a ridiculous amount of money. I saw a wage slip of one of the PNG local guards, and he was getting $1.50 an hour. So it's not going to the local people per se. Some of it maybe. It didn't go to the local hospital. There's a lot of money going somewhere.
Yes,
it's not going to the refugees. That's for sure. No. They're not getting the medical treatment. So, and this is another travesty. So, these are some of the things I try to explain to people, because for me, it's not about politics. It's not about points of view. It's about just, let's have a look at the facts.
Yeah.
Let's see what we got here. This is what's happening. This much money, this much inhumane, you know, where they're being kept, the way treatments, and so it is. You know, which one of those are you okay with? Which one, you know, because nothing can justify. There's nothing. I can't see anything can justify that kind of that behaviour. You know, so
because you visit through these music talk events, you visit communities throughout Western Australia, in particular at the moment, because you can't travel anywhere else. Yeah. What kind of reception do you get? I imagine some communities are rather conservative in their outlook, and they're just, you know, they have an understanding of what's happened. How is it that you're able to get across to them some of the things that you feel are important, and how do they respond to you?
They're absolutely shocked. They're shocked. Every single event I've done, they're shocked. So I've gone from Cairns to Sydney to Eurobodalla. I've gone from Denmark to Melbourne and back. I've done lots in Perth, WA. every single one, they are absolutely shocked. And I think obviously the music does help, because what I do is I play a song. So music is a bridge to engage people. So, you know, when you play music, you're opening the hearts of the people, and then you making space for the truth, you know, to be I don't know, experienced or heard or understood it. And it's a different, it's on another level. So we're going in on another level. And I think what happens is when they meet the refugees in these pictures or on the video or in through the story, the song or a poem that they may have written that I read out, I think they kind of suddenly or are suddenly realize or are connected to the human elements. And when they know the details, it's different, because a lot of them are just like I was, you know, in the beginning, before I knew about it. Oh, well, they just go to this place, they're processed, you know, what's the big deal, you know? And so when they realize actually that the guys that went there in 2013 are the same ones that we're still dealing with now, it's not like they go and they're getting processed, like, you know, then there's nothing's arrived since 2013, because we've got the boat turn back policy in place. So it's the same ones for all those years, and that actually they've gone through all these horrendous things, you know. So when the people, I think, when they hear this, they connect on some level.
Yeah. Well, music has that way of cutting through.
And also another thing is, and sorry, Ian. Another thing is for what's really important to me is what I see in people is there's always emotion in every event I've done, and there's people actually, I can see they're filled with guilt and shame of what's happening, because it's their country or their you know, and that's the thing that we need to get past. Because that is that's the problem, because when we're filled with guilt and shame, we're paralyzed.
Yes.
And I think that's the intention of the powers that be, because then we kind of can't sort of move past it. And so that's a part of what I do is like, look, we need to get past the guilt and shame.
Yes.
It's happening. Let's roll up our sleeves, get our gloves on. Let's just get on with the work. Yeah.
That's a helpful insight, Dawn. I mean, we don't treat animals like this. You know, if there's an expose on the way horses are treated, or the way chickens are treated, or the way greyhounds are treated, there's an outcry. The community responds strongly. The laws are changed. You know, but that doesn't seem to be happening here. We're going to play a song with some images, Cross to Bear, I believe it's called. But can you tell us a bit about that song? Because there's images from one of the refugees in this song.
Yeah. So Jalal Mahamid, he's a Awazi refugee. So he's an Arabic refugee from Awaz, which is southern western Iran. And he was on Nauru for 6 years. He was on his way home back from a medical appointment, and he got beaten up by locals. They badly beat him up, and he's had problems with his head since then, with headaches and the trauma of it. And also he lost a tooth. And he's an incredible poet and artist. He just writes such profound, deep stuff. And he's just a young guy. He's still locked up. He was brought here 2 years ago for medical treatment through Medivac. He was put into the Kangaroo Point Hotel in Brisbane, and he was locked up there for 18 months. And then he was sent to the Brisbane Immigration Transfer Accommodation. And so it's his artwork is featured throughout this video, and also his words at the middle. He wrote the words in the middle.
As a matter of fact, how well do you act when it's all about you? When the cards have been laid, the table's been paid, stern faces invade, cold sweats break out, people starting to shout, no longer about you. The political stances don't take any chances, it could be about you. Gunfire from all around, knives being thrown to the ground, never a good time to stand your ground. Heads are turning, names are burning, in the minds of those who dare to take their share of all the pain, all the shame of those with a cross to bear. All the pain, all the shame of those with a cross to bear. All the pain, all the shame of those with a cross to bear. How did we get into this state? It's time to open the gate. How did we get into this state? It's time to open the gate. Of all the pain, all the shame of those with a cross to bear. All the pain, all the shame of those with a cross to bear.
Well, we're in this season where different communities across Australia have been impacted by lockdown and having their freedoms restricted in just a very small way. Perhaps we
Yeah.
can find some empathy for those who continue to be locked up in detention without cause and have been for years. Dawn, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and for sharing your story and your music.
Thank you so much, Ian. Thanks for doing this. It's awesome.